The crystal wine glass quivered faintly between my fingers, just as my husband Derek Langford raised his own at the opposite end of our long cherrywood dining table. We were surrounded by what was supposed to be our closest friends and family, but at that moment, they felt like spectators at a silent execution. His voice sliced through the room, calm and confident, soaked in self-satisfaction like a man who thought he'd already won. "To new beginnings," he said, eyes gleaming, "without you." Without me? The words cracked like thunder, jagged and ice-cold. A stunned hush blanketed the room. Wine glasses hovered in midair. My sister Rachel's hand found mine beneath the table and gripped tight, anchoring me while my parents suddenly became consumed with their dinner plates. Our friends? They raised their glasses in eerie unison, a disturbing choir of loyalty, loyal not to me, but to the man they'd always admired more. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my Cabernet, the one I'd been saving for a special occasion, and gently set the glass back down. Our eyes met across the golden brown turkey I had basted for hours that morning. "To new beginnings," I echoed softly, my voice more composed than I felt. What Derek didn't realize was that I had already begun my own new beginning, quietly and methodically. And by the time he figured it out, he'd be far too late. The next month was going to get very, very interesting. The clinking of forks resumed, conversation hesitantly returned, but beneath the surface, tension simmered like a pot about to boil over. Derek, ever the polished performer, slipped effortlessly back into his role as the charming host, smiling, serving, playing the man everyone thought they knew. "More wine, Clara?" asked Adam Green, his business partner, nudging a bottle toward me in an attempt to break the strain coiling around the table. "No, thank you," I replied, smiling a little too tightly. "I need to keep a clear head tonight." 3 months ago, I wouldn't have recognized the woman I'd become. Back then, I was Clara Benson, the perfect wife, organizer of charity galas, decorator of tablescapes, gracious hostess to Derek's clients, always elegant, always agreeable, always pretending not to notice the late-night calls, or the perfume that didn't belong to me, or how his days often floated past me at parties, searching for something or someone more exciting. That version of Clara died the day I found the text messages. They weren't from another woman. That, somehow, would have been easier. No, these were messages to our friends, to my family, to Grant, his lawyer in Colorado. Plans, detailed, deliberate plans on how to minimize what I would receive in the divorce, how to frame me as unstable, emotional, unfit, how to quietly rewrite the narrative of our 15-year marriage as one of sacrifice on his part, not mine. "Sweetheart, the turkey is especially delicious this year," my mother said suddenly, her voice unnaturally bright as she tried to guide us back to safer ground. "Thank you, Mom," I said smoothly. "I tried a new brining technique." I spooned more mashed potatoes onto my plate, though I had no intention of eating a single bite. Derek had suggested canceling dinner, given the circumstances, but I'd insisted. Traditions mattered, didn't they? "Family matters," I said aloud, turning my eyes toward him. "Right, Derek." His jaw tensed. "Always thinking of others, Clara. That's what makes you so special." His voice dipped just enough for the sarcasm to flicker beneath the words. That had always been his view. My kindness was a flaw, something to exploit, not admire. I glanced slowly around the table, at the people who had been in our lives for so long. How many of them had known? How many had heard the whispers of his plan before I did? "I've been meaning to tell everyone," Derek began, rising to command the room again, glass still in hand. "I've accepted a position with Dalton & Chase LLP in Silvergate. I'll be leading their corporate litigation division starting in January." A wave of polite clapping and murmured congratulations swept the room. "That's incredible news," Adam chimed in, lifting his glass. "We'll miss you at the firm, both of you." I smiled, tilting my head lightly. "Oh, I won't be going to Silvergate." I let the pause linger. As Derek so beautifully put it, our paths are diverging. The room stilled again, uneasy, thick with everything unspoken. Tessa, Derek's sister, cleared her throat. "Clara, maybe this isn't the right time. When is the right time, Tessa? I asked. Between dessert and coffee? Or should we wait until everyone leaves so they can go on pretending it isn't happening? Clara, Derek's voice cut through the air, low and sharp, a warning, the same tone he used when he thought I was embarrassing him in public, when I dared to color outside the lines of the role he'd assigned me. I folded my napkin with care, placed it beside my plate, and rose from my seat. I think it's time for dessert, I said. Pumpkin pie and apple crumble, if anyone's still hungry. Then I turned and walked toward the kitchen, never once looking back. In the kitchen, I pressed my palms against the chilled surface of the marble countertop and drew in a long, steadying breath. From the dining room, I could still hear Derek's voice, smooth and falsely sympathetic, drifting through the doorway. "She's taking it hard," he said to our guests, like I was some tragic side note. "Her therapist thinks it might be depression." What? That was a lie, an easy, manipulative one. I hadn't seen a therapist since the miscarriage, 3 years ago. The one Derek had said was probably for the best, because children, according to him, would only complicate his career path. God, I had grieved that loss alone, completely alone. As I sliced the pumpkin pie with mechanical precision, my thoughts flickered to the quiet steps I had taken, each one a silent act of resistance. The secret bank account, the consultation with Marie, the divorce attorney Derek knew nothing about, the signed lease on a tiny downtown apartment, the job interview at Langston Art House next week. My escape route sketched carefully in the background while Derek built his fantasy of a life without me. "You need help?" Rachel's voice broke the silence as she appeared in the doorway, her brow creased with concern. "I've got it under control," I told her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I actually meant it. When I returned to the dining room, Derek had found a new topic for his performance. He was talking about the lake house in Fairmere, the one we'd dreamed of for years, our supposed retirement haven, the one I thought we'd grow old in. Now it was his lake house, the one he was planning to buy. I walked calmly around the table, setting slices of pie before our guests. As I handed Derek his, our fingers brushed. He looked up at me with a flicker of something unfamiliar. Was it doubt, regret, fear? I couldn't tell, but I knew this. His mask had slipped, even just for a second. I returned to my seat, lifted my wine glass one more time, and said clearly, "To dreams deferred, and to finally waking up." Later that evening, after most of the guests had slipped out with murmured excuses and lingering glances, Derek cornered me in the hallway near the staircase. "Was that really necessary?" he snapped in a hiss. "You just had to make a scene?" I arched an eyebrow. "You're the one who decided to announce our separation over turkey and stuffing, remember? I simply followed your lead." He raked a hand through his perfectly groomed hair, agitated now. "I've been more than generous with the settlement offer. Don't push me, Clara." I stared at him for a long moment, as if seeing him for the very first time. I used to mistake that controlled intensity for strength. I used to think his ambition meant vision. I used to believe in him. "The thing is, Derek," I said slowly, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." His eyes narrowed. "You should be." He straightened his cuffs like a man preparing for battle. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." Oh, God. Later that night, after everyone had gone and Derek had retreated to the guest room to brood over his unraveling control, I stood alone in the quiet kitchen. Bits of pie crust and cranberry sauce dotted the counter like confetti from a broken celebration. I rinsed plates under warm water, trying to soothe my racing thoughts. Then my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "It's done. Record secured. Meeting tomorrow as planned." I stared at it, then quietly deleted it, hands trembling. There was no going back now. Derek had spent months plotting his escape. What he didn't know was that I'd been building mine too, only mine had teeth. Mine came with proof, with leverage, with fire. I picked up the wedding photo sitting by the kitchen window. We were laughing in that picture, beaming like we knew the future. How naive, how far away that girl seemed. With deliberate care, I placed the frame face down in the drawer. The game had started. And Derek had no idea he was already several moves behind. Morning crept in under a slate-gray November sky, the sun barely managing to push past the clouds. I had barely slept, every nerve thrumming with adrenaline and anticipation. When I came downstairs, Derek was already in the kitchen. Impeccable, of course. Charcoal suit, crisp shirt, eyes glued to his phone. "There's coffee," he said, not bothering to look up. This cold, silent cohabitation, that was our new normal. "Thanks," I said quietly, pouring myself a cup. "We should talk about last night," I ventured. "What's there to talk about?" he said, dismissively, like I'd brought up a billing error instead of an emotional ambush. "You were upset. It's understandable." I blinked. I wasn't upset, Derek. I was blindsided. I took a sip of coffee, bitter and scalding. 15 years together, and you chose Thanksgiving dinner to announce our separation in front of my family, your clients, everyone? He finally glanced up. His eyes were cool and calculating. "I thought it would be easier. One announcement, everyone together. Efficient." Efficient? I let the word hang in the air. It was perfect, chillingly perfect. That was how he approached everything, even the dismantling of our marriage. "I've been meaning to ask," he said casually, setting his phone down. "What are your plans? I assume you'll want to stay here in Portsmouth." I smiled faintly. "I'm still figuring that out." What I didn't say was that I had been figuring it out for months. Because Derek's betrayal wasn't loud, it wasn't scandalous, it was quiet, surgical. He had been slipping assets away one by one, little discrepancies in our statements, documents that vanished. The deed to our summer cottage in Mira Bay, suddenly only in his name. When I questioned him, he fed me polite half-lies, calming explanations, enough to make me doubt my own memory, enough to make me feel small and hysterical. Gaslighting. Rachel had taught me that word. Now I knew it by heart. "Well, don't worry about money," Derek said, brushing imaginary lint off his sleeve like the topic bored him. "The settlement's fair, more than fair, honestly, especially considering organs and equitable distribution state." I tilted my head slightly. "I'm not worried about money, Derek." And that was the truth. What haunted me wasn't the finances. It was justice. It was accountability. It was the unbearable silence of every betrayal that had gone unchallenged. His phone buzzed, rescuing him from the discomfort of my stare. "Big case prep today," he muttered, already halfway to the door. "Oh, and don't forget dinner with the Landrys on Friday. Try to keep things discreet. The senior partners don't need to hear about our situation yet." Of course they didn't. His reputation always had front-row priority. After he left, I stood in the quiet of the house, letting the stillness settle. Then I went upstairs and took my time getting ready. Dark jeans, a cream silk blouse, my good leather boots. I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. She looked sharper, focused, like someone who had stopped apologizing for existing. At 10:30, I headed downtown to Doyle Strategic Intelligence, where I had an appointment. The woman who greeted me had a direct, unblinking gaze and a handshake that didn't tolerate weakness. "Mrs. Benson, I'm Samantha Doyle," she said, motioning toward a chair. "Let's get started." Over the next hour, Samantha laid it all out. Bank transfers to offshore accounts, a second mortgage on our home that I had never signed, stock sales from our joint portfolio. But the worst? Emails. Dozens of them. Between Derek and Grant Whitmore, his old college friend at Dalton and Chase and Silvergate, planning this exodus down to the last detail for over a year. "Is it enough?" I asked, my pulse thudding like a war drum as I turned through the thick folder in my lap. "For leverage?" Samantha gave a tight nod. "Absolutely. For criminal charges? Harder. We'd have to prove intent." She leaned in, eyes steady. "But trust me, men like your husband, they fear public shame more than prison bars. The threat of exposure is a far sharper weapon." I nodded slowly, picturing how carefully Derek had constructed his image. the charitable husband, the polished litigator, the man with the perfect wife. And the way he painted me behind the scenes, unstable, difficult, probably depressed, definitely inconvenient. "What's next?" I asked. "That depends on what you want." Samantha folded her arms, studying me. "Revenge, financial stability, or a clean break?" The question rocked me. What did I want? I had been in survival mode for so long, planning, calculating, collecting proof. I hadn't paused to dream beyond the fire line. "I want him to face the consequences," I said. "I want what's rightfully mine, and I want my life back, a real one where I'm not just someone's wife." Samantha nodded, a flicker of approval in her eyes. "Then we move to phase 2. I'll prep the documentation for your attorney. With this, you'll negotiate from a position of power." When I stepped out of her office into the cold, crisp air, I felt something I hadn't in months. Lighter. Not free yet, but close enough to see the edge of the cage. As I drove across town to meet Rachel for lunch, my phone buzzed. Derek. I let it ring once before answering. "Hello?" "Where are you?" he demanded. "I just got a call from Langston Art House. They said you scheduled a job interview." I pulled into a parking spot and shut off the engine. "I'm running errands," I said calmly. "And yes, I do have an interview." "A job interview?" He practically choked on the words. "Clara, you haven't worked in over 10 years. What could you possibly—" "Assistant curator," I interrupted, keeping my voice light. "At Langston, tomorrow at 10. He exhaled sharply. This is exactly what I'm talking about. These impulsive, erratic decisions. You're not thinking clearly." "Actually, Derek," I replied, a smile tugging at my lips, "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years." "We'll talk about this tonight," he snapped, using the voice that had always ended arguments before they began. "No, we won't," I said, voice cool. "I'm having dinner with Rachel. Don't wait up." And before he could retake control of the conversation, I hung up. The thrill that pulsed through me was small but potent, a rebellion in a single click. Rachel was already waiting at our favorite cafe, a steaming mug of chai in front of her. When I walked in, she looked up and blinked. "You look different," she said, studying her face. "Better?" She smiled. "Stronger." "I feel stronger," I said, sitting down. "I met with Samantha Goyle this morning." Rachel leaned in. "And?" "It's all true. Everything I suspected and more. Derek's been planning this for over a year, moving assets, locking me out of accounts. He already has an apartment leased in Silvergate." Rachel's eyes flashed. "That snake. So what now?" "I fight back," I said simply, starting with this. I reached into my bag and slid a small silver key across the table. "What's this?" "Safe deposit box key. I need you to hold on to it." Rachel took the key, closing her fingers around it without hesitation. Her face grew serious. "Whatever you need," she said. "I've got you." Later that afternoon, I visited the bank under the guise of routine business. My hands trembled only slightly as I slid open the safe deposit box and removed what I'd come for: critical documents and a flash drive that contained copies of everything Samantha Doyle's team had uncovered. If Derek ever caught wind of what I was doing, I had no doubt he'd destroy every shred of evidence he could find. As I stepped out onto the sidewalk, tucking the flash drive into my coat pocket, I paused. Across the street, near a line of parked cars, I saw a familiar silhouette. Tessa Langford, Derek's sister. She was watching me. Phone in hand, standing just still enough to make my stomach twist. Our eyes locked for half a second before she quickly turned and walked away, her heels clacking against the concrete. Was Derek using her to follow me? That night, while I was brushing my hair and preparing to meet Rachel for dinner, my phone buzzed. A text from Tessa. "We need to talk. Not everything is as it seems. Meet me tomorrow at 9 a.m., Hudson Row Cafe." I stared at the message. A wave of confusion and suspicion rolled over me. Tessa had always been fiercely loyal to her brother, playing the role of polished socialite and family gatekeeper. Why now? Why reach out? Before I could decide whether to respond, another message flashed across my screen, this one from an unknown number. Warning, Dee knows about the investigator. Surveillance footage at the office has been deleted. Be careful. My fingers went cold. My hand trembled as I set the phone down on the vanity. Derek had connections, resources. He knew I was building a case, and now he was watching me. I texted Rachel immediately. Change of plans, emergency, I need to see you now. As I grabbed my coat and keys, something red blinked in the corner of my eye. The small home security camera on our bookshelf, the one Derek insisted we installed last year after that break-in 2 neighborhoods over. I had almost forgotten it existed, which was probably the point. I walked straight over, looked directly into the lens, and calmly unplugged it from the wall. Game on, Derek, I whispered. Rachel's apartment sat on the 4th floor of a walk-up in Brookmere. Her space was warm and full of life, with worn leather chairs, scattered books, and windowsill plants that curled lazily toward the glow of the street lamps. When I arrived, breathless from the stairs and the chaos inside my chest, she opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a tight hug. "What happened?" she asked, guiding me to the couch. I handed her my phone. Tessa texted. She wants to meet. And I got another warning. Derek knows I hired an investigator. He's scrubbing evidence, and now someone's watching me. Rachel's expression hardened. You can't trust Tessa. She's always danced to Derek's tune. I know, I whispered, pressing my fingers to my temples. But what if she knows something important, something I could use? Or what if it's a trap, she countered, to find out how much you know? She handed me a glass of wine. What did Samantha say about the evidence? It's solid, I said, taking a grateful sip. Enough for divorce leverage, but probably not for criminal charges. Now that Derek knows I'm coming for me, he's going to start moving faster, covering his tracks. Rachel narrowed her eyes. Then we need to move faster, too. I blinked.
What do you mean? He thinks he's in control, right? That you're playing by his schedule. So don't. Throw him off balance. Do something he isn't expecting. I thought about that. Like meeting Tessa, but on my terms? Exactly.
The next morning dawned gray and cold. I hadn't slept. I'd stayed the night on Rachel's couch, too rattled to return home. The last thing I wanted was to face Derek with questions I wasn't ready to answer. I borrowed one of Rachel's outfits, black turtleneck, dark jeans, and a wool coat. A different look, a disguise almost, just enough to blend in. Instead of going to Hudson Row Cafe, as Tessa had suggested, I texted her a new location, Red Fern Diner near Monroe Plaza, a well-trafficked spot with booths that allowed for some degree of privacy. It felt safer. I needed to be able to watch the door. I arrived early and chose a booth at the back, my back to the wall, eyes on the entrance. The diner was quiet at this hour. A soft murmur of morning chatter hummed around me. 20 minutes later, Tessa arrived. I almost didn't recognize her. She was usually pristine, perfectly styled, surgically composed. Today, her blonde hair was pulled into a haphazard ponytail. Her eyes were ringed with exhaustion. "You changed the location," she said, sliding into the booth. "Yes." I didn't explain. She didn't ask. The waitress came. We ordered coffee. The silence stretched until she walked away. "I know what Derek's doing," Tessa said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. "The offshore transfers, the smear campaign, all of it." I blinked. "And you're just telling me this now, after 15 years of family holidays and Sunday brunches?" She winced. "I didn't know, not until recently, when he asked me to help discredit you." My stomach dropped. Discredit me how? Tessa looked down at her coffee. "He wanted me to tell people I'd seen you drinking heavily, that you'd been unstable since the miscarriage, that maybe you were on medication." My throat tightened. I stared at the table, trying to swallow the fury building behind my ribs. 3 years ago, I had lost a piece of my soul. Derek had been patient for a while, until my grief outlasted his convenience. "Did you do it?" I asked quietly. "No," she said, meeting my eyes. That's when I started paying attention. That's when I saw who he really was. I studied her face, pale, tight, nervous. "Why should I believe you're not still covering for him?" Tessa reached into her bag and slid a manila envelope across the table. "Because I found these. Last week, I was at your house. Derek left his laptop open while he took a call. I copied what I could." Inside were printed emails, conversations between Derek and Grant Whitmore, detailed plans about how to manage the Clara situation, a step-by-step breakdown of how to strip me of everything while making it look like my fault. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Because what he's doing is wrong," Tessa whispered. She twisted her wedding ring unconsciously. I remembered that tic from years ago. And because I know what it's like to be married to a man who sees you as an asset, not a person. I looked at her closely. The faint yellow bloom of a bruise peeked from beneath her makeup, just along her jaw. "Tessa, don't," she cut me off. "This isn't about me. It's about stopping Derek before he takes everything from you." "Does he know you're here?" She shook her head. "He thinks I'm at yoga, but we don't have much time. He's speeding things up since he found out you're investigating. The move to Silvergate, it's not just for work. It's so he can establish residency. Illinois law is more favorable for divorce." "When is he filing?" "Next week, December 5th, 6 days from now." I exhaled shakenly. That was so much sooner than I expected. "There's something else," she said, hesitating. "He's meeting with his firm's partners today. I think he's going to try to freeze your access to all your joint accounts. He'll claim it's to protect the assets from your erratic behavior." My heart pounded. I'd moved some money, but not enough. If he froze those accounts before I could file, everything could fall apart. My thoughts spun into overdrive. I had moved some funds, but nowhere near enough. If Derek froze my access before I could formally file, he'd cut me off at the knees. "I need to go," I said, standing abruptly and gathering the folder of documents Tessa had given me. "Thank you for this." As I turned to leave, her hand caught my wrist. "Clara," she said quietly, "be careful. Derek's not just cunning, he's desperate. I've never seen him like this." "Like what?" I asked, meeting her eyes. She held my gaze. "Afraid." I froze. Derek? Afraid of me? The thought stunned me. I had spent 15 years smoothing his shirts, organizing his business dinners, standing politely beside him at every fundraiser like a well-trained wife. I had smiled when he needed me to smile, stayed quiet when it was convenient. Could he really be afraid of me now? Apparently, yes. I didn't have time to dwell on it. I rushed to my car, heart hammering, and was just pulling out of the parking lot when my phone rang. Marie. "Clara," she said, skipping any greeting, "we need to meet immediately. Derek's attorney just contacted me with a settlement offer. They want a response by end of day." "I'm on my way," I said, shifting gears and heading downtown. I found Marie waiting for me in her office, cool and composed as always. A formidable woman in her 50s, her silver hair pinned back in a sharp twist. Her reputation for dismantling high-stakes divorce defenses was why I'd hired her. She didn't flinch, not even for men like Derek Langford. "This," she said, sliding the proposal across the desk, "is a tactical maneuver. He's trying to close the window before we finish gathering evidence. On the surface, it looks generous, but you'd walk away with maybe 20% of what's rightfully yours." I scanned the neatly formatted lines. Marie was right. On paper, it looked clean, respectable. But underneath, it was theft wrapped in civility. "He knows about the investigator," I said, laying Tessa's envelope on her desk. Marie flipped through the pages, her brow lifting as she read. "These are substantial," she said, already reaching for her phone. "I need to make some calls." While she stepped out to contact the court, I called the bank. I already knew what I would hear, but that didn't dull the sting when the manager confirmed it. Derek had restricted access to our joint accounts. He'd cited unusual activity and unauthorized withdrawals. Classic Derek, turning truth into suspicion and acting before I could. When Marie returned, I gave her the update. "He's overplayed his hand," she said, eyes gleaming with new purpose. "This is exactly what we need for an emergency injunction. Judge Monroe can see us today, 4 o'clock. My heart raced. "Today?" Marie nodded. "Pack a bag when you go home. Once we file this motion, that house won't be safe for you." As I left her office, my phone lit up with a new message. "Derek, we need to talk. Dinner tonight. Important decisions to make." I stared at the screen, a chill settling in my spine. He had no idea what was coming. I typed out a calm reply with fingers that no longer shook. "Yes, let's talk. I'll cook your favorite. One last dinner together. One last chance to look into the eyes of the man I once loved before I flipped his carefully constructed world on its head."
The courthouse loomed large and unforgiving. Marble pillars rose like silent sentinels, the echo of hurried footsteps and hushed conversations bouncing off the stone walls. I sat beside Marie on a hard wooden bench outside Judge Monroe's chambers, clutching my folder of evidence. My stomach twisted itself into anxious knots. Marie leaned in. "Remember, let me do the talking. Only answer if asked. Keep it short." I nodded. The door creaked open. A clerk gave us a brief nod. "You may enter." Inside, the chambers were dimly lit and austere. Judge Evelyn Monroe sat behind a wide oak desk, silver-rimmed glasses perched low on her nose, her face etched with years of seeing exactly this kind of war. What I hadn't expected was the man already seated across the room. Victor Hayes, Derek's lawyer. Of course. "Your Honor," Marie began, "we were not informed this would be a dual-party hearing." Judge Monroe looked over her glasses. "Mr. Hayes contacted my clerk when he learned of your emergency filing. Given the nature of the accusations, I thought it appropriate to hear both sides." Marie's spine straightened. Her voice, though calm, carried steel. "We're prepared to proceed, Your Honor." I exhaled slowly and kept my eyes fixed on the folder in my lap, trying to still the tremble in my fingertips. This was it. The first battle in a war I never wanted, but could no longer avoid. For the next 40 minutes, Marie laid out our case with calm, unwavering precision. She walked Judge Monroe through every layer of Derek's deceit, his deliberate movement of marital assets, the second mortgage I hadn't signed, and the damning emails outlining a plan to leave me with nothing but legal dust. Judge Monroe listened closely, her sharp eyes occasionally narrowing as she asked for clarification. She took notes with slow, deliberate strokes, giving nothing away. When it was Victor Hayes' turn, he stood and adjusted his perfectly tailored jacket, adopting a tone that was both smooth and insidious. "Mrs. Benson," he began, "has experienced significant emotional challenges since a miscarriage 3 years ago. My client has done his best to support her, but her recent behavior, hiring private investigators, making large unexplained withdrawals from joint accounts, has raised concerns about her judgment." My stomach twisted. I bit my tongue so hard I could taste blood. I wanted to scream, to shout back at the polished lie he was weaving, but I held still. He continued, "And these so-called schemes to deprive Mrs. Benson of her fair share? They're standard financial precautions for a partner preparing to relocate out of state for professional reasons. Mr. Langford has offered a very generous settlement, far beyond what the law requires." Judge Monroe looked from one attorney to the other, then turned her attention to me. "Mrs. Benson," she said evenly, "did you authorize the hiring of a private investigator to examine your husband's financial activity?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice steady despite the tremble in my hands. "And why did you feel that was necessary?" I took a slow breath. This was my moment. Because documents began vanishing from our home. Because accounts I should have had access to were suddenly restricted.
Because the deed to our summer home in Mira Bay was reissued in Derek's name only, without my knowledge or consent. The judge nodded thoughtfully, making another notation in her folder. Then she turned to Victor. Mr. Hayes, can your client explain the second mortgage taken out on the marital residence 3 months ago? Victor's mouth twitched slightly. My client would need to address that directly, Your Honor. I see, Judge Monroe replied. She set down her pen, folded her hands, and looked at both parties. Here is my ruling. All joint assets belonging to Derek and Clara Langford are hereby frozen effective immediately.
Neither party may transfer, sell, or otherwise dispose of any marital property without court approval until further notice. A beat of silence fell in the room. Then she added, furthermore, Mr. Langford will provide a complete accounting of all financial activity from the past 6 months within 48 hours. Marie's hand found mine under the table and gave it a firm squeeze. Your Honor, Victor protested, this ruling will significantly affect my client's ability to proceed with his relocation to Silvergate. He has accepted a partnership there. This delay puts him in a precarious position. Judge Monroe didn't blink. Perhaps Mr. Langford should have considered that before restructuring marital assets without his wife's knowledge or consent. She closed her folder. We are adjourned. Outside the courthouse, Marie allowed herself a tiny, satisfied smile. That went better than expected, she said. The asset freeze is in place, and the 48-hour disclosure requirement, that makes it nearly impossible for Derek to bury anything else. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Derek, where are you? Thought we were having dinner. I stared at the screen, the message blinking like a warning light. What now? I asked softly. Go home, Marie said. Act normal. Don't mention the court order. Let him hear it from Hayes. And remember what I said. Pack a bag. When I pulled into the driveway, Derek's car was already there. I paused inside the foyer, steadied my breath, and stepped into the kitchen. He stood at the counter, opening a bottle of wine. His suit jacket was draped casually over the back of a chair. There you are, he said. His tone was light, but not warm. Neutral, controlled. I was beginning to worry. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a mess, I said, setting my purse down on the island, right on top of the folder I had carefully zipped shut. I thought I'd make pasta, I added, something simple. Sounds good, he said, handing me a glass of wine. I wanted to talk to you about the job and Silvergate. I busied myself with pulling ingredients from the fridge. What about it? It's a major opportunity, partnership track, big salary bump. He leaned back against the counter, watching me with that same measured expression he wore in courtrooms. I've been thinking about us, about everything, he said slowly, and maybe we've been too hasty. Maybe we should reconsider this separation. I nearly dropped the tomatoes in my hands. Too hasty? You could come to Silvergate, he continued, sipping his wine like we were discussing vacation plans. We've built a life, Clara. 15 years. That's not nothing. I stared at him, blinking. Was this real? Was he actually walking back his plans, or was this part of some new strategy? Then his phone buzzed. I knew. Hayes, telling him about the court order. Derek glanced at the screen. I need to take this. Work. He disappeared into his home office, shutting the door behind him. And I, still holding a glass of wine I had no intention of drinking, waited for the explosion. I moved quickly, heart hammering in my chest. Upstairs, in our bedroom, I yanked a suitcase from the closet and threw it open on the bed. Essentials only. Clothes, toiletries, vital documents. I opened the drawer where I kept my grandmother's jewelry box, delicate, blue velvet, worn soft with time, and placed it gently inside. Through the closed door, I could hear Derek's voice rising. He was yelling now. He had gotten the call. He knew. I zipped the suitcase and rushed down the hallway. I was halfway down the stairs when his office door flew open with a bang. You went to court? His face was flushed, lips tight with fury. An emergency injunction? Are you serious, Clara?
You restricted our bank accounts, I replied, my tone flat. You took out a second mortgage without telling me. What did you expect me to do? His eyes dropped to the suitcase in my hand. Where do you think you're going? I'm staying with Rachel, just for a while, until things cool down. Things aren't going to cool down, he snapped, stepping closer. You've just declared war, Clara. Do you have any idea what you've done? I said nothing. He raked his hand through his hair, agitated. The partnership in Silvergate required a financial buy-in. I needed those assets. You mean our assets? I said quietly. Assets you tried to funnel away while I wasn't looking? They would have benefited both of us eventually. No, they would have benefited you. That's all that ever really mattered to you. He shook his head in disbelief. You think you're clever, don't you? With your investigator, your emergency filings? Clara, you have no idea how the real world works. Then he said it. Without me, you're nothing. The words cracked through the air like a slap. In all our years together, every argument, every passive dig, he had never said it out loud. Not like this. I stood tall, suitcase still clutched in my hand. I guess we'll see about that. I stepped toward the door. He moved to block it. We're not done talking. Yes, we are, for tonight at least. Or what? You'll call the police on me too? Add that to your victim narrative? I'm not a victim, I said calmly, locking eyes with him. Not anymore. And I have a lawyer expecting me to check in, a sister who knows exactly where I'm going.
So yes, Derek, if you don't let me leave, there will be consequences. Something in my tone must have reached him, because he stepped aside. But his face had hardened into stone. You won't win this, he hissed. It's not about winning, I said, opening the door. It's about surviving. As I walked to my car, the weight of 15 years clung to me. Guilt, duty, grief. But it was loosening. For the first time in months, I felt it lift ever so slightly, just enough to let a flicker of hope shine through. My phone buzzed just as I started the engine. Unknown number. Asset freeze confirmed. All accounts secured. Phase 3 begins tomorrow. R. Doyle. Phase 3. Whatever that meant, I wouldn't be facing it alone. Rachel's apartment felt like a sanctuary. I collapsed onto her couch, exhausted, and fell into a restless sleep, dreaming in fragments. Derek's face, the judge's ruling, the suitcase in my hands. By morning, my phone was lit up with missed calls and text messages from Derek. They ranged from syrupy regret to seething threats. I ignored them all. At exactly 8 a.m., Marie called. Good morning. How are you holding up? I'm okay, I murmured, accepting a steaming cup of coffee from Rachel. What now? Phase 3, Marie said. Samantha's meeting us at my office at 10. We're compiling everything for the formal divorce filing. And Clara, her voice softened, the judge's order worked. Derek's lawyer submitted a preliminary accounting last night. They're scrambling. When I arrived at Marie's office, Samantha Doyle was already there, her laptop open and folders spread across the conference table like an evidence map. Mrs. Benson, she greeted me, clicking through files. We've made significant progress. My team legally accessed your husband's private email server through the court's order. She paused, catching my hesitation. All of it was done above board. I nodded, taking the seat across from her. What followed was a blur of information, layer upon layer of deception. Derek hadn't just been planning this for a few months. He'd been preparing for over 18 months of calculated moves, secret accounts, offshore transfers, and shell corporations. Connections in Silvergate, cover stories, contingency plans. But why? I asked, genuinely baffled. Oregon law is fair. It's not like I would have taken everything. Marie and Samantha exchanged a look. There's something else, Marie said quietly. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a copy of a life insurance policy. On me. $2 million. Derek and I both have life insurance, I said slowly.
That's not unusual. Look at the beneficiary, Samantha prompted gently. I scanned the page. It wasn't Derek. It was a trust. A trust with Derek Langford listed as the sole trustee. I don't understand, I whispered, though a chill had already settled in my bones. Alone, this might be a questionable but legal decision, Marie said, but combined with everything else, the asset transfers, the push for residency in a different state, his attempt to paint you as unstable, it creates a very troubling pattern. You think I couldn't finish the sentence. We don't know what he intended, Samantha said, choosing her words carefully, but we're taking precautions. My team is monitoring your home's security system. We've preserved all communication logs, and we've fast-tracked the divorce filing. I sat back in my chair, dazed. The man I had married, the man I had loved for so long, who was he now? On the bright side, Marie added gently, this gives us strong grounds to request full disclosure of all assets, even those he tried to hide. Judge Monroe has already expressed concern. If Derek fights this, he's at risk for criminal scrutiny. I nodded slowly. What do you need from me? I need your signature on these, Marie said, sliding a stack of documents across the table. I reached for the pen, no hesitation this time. As I signed the divorce petition, a strange, quiet calm settled over me. For the first time in what felt like years, the path ahead was no longer murky or spinning beneath my feet. It was solid, sharp, clear. No more guessing, no more explaining away his behavior, no more trying to fix something that had already shattered. Just the steady, methodical untangling of two lives that had long since stopped being one. One more thing, Samantha said, reaching into her bag. She placed a sleek silver device on the table and slid it toward me. This is a new phone. Use it exclusively from now on. We've transferred your contacts and essential files. I stared at the device. Is that really necessary? Samantha nodded. Your old phone is compromised. Derek had access to several linked accounts, including location tracking. We believe he's been monitoring you for a while. A fresh chill crawled over my skin. The idea of him knowing where I'd been, who I'd seen, twisted my stomach into knots. When I stepped out of Marie's office, the December wind stung my cheeks. I needed air. Still gripping the new phone, I walked a few blocks to the nearest park and sat on a cold bench under a barren tree. Children played on the frozen jungle gym, their laughter sharp and bright against the silence. For a moment, I let myself imagine being one of them, free, unburdened, safe. Then my new phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Hello? Clara, came Tessa's voice, strained and hurried. He knows. I stiffened. Derek? She exhaled shakily. He showed up at my place this morning, demanding to know if I'd been in contact with you. I told him I hadn't seen you since Thanksgiving, but Clara, I've never seen him like this. Are you okay? I asked. I'm fine, but that's not why I'm calling. She dropped her voice. He said something about contingency plans. One last move. Whatever it is, I think it's happening soon. What kind of move? He didn't say directly, but he mentioned your gallery interview. Said something snide like, her precious art career will have to wait. I gripped the phone tighter. My interview, tomorrow at 10 a.m. at Langston Art House. The job I had prepared for over weeks, the portfolio reviews, the calls, the hope. My first real step toward independence. Thanks for telling me, I said. I'll be careful. As soon as we hung up, I called Marie. Don't go, she said immediately, her tone firm. We don't know what he's planning. It could be anything. But something stubborn surged inside me. No, I said quietly. He's taken so much, I'm not letting him take this too. Marie hesitated. Then we'll take precautions. Samantha will have someone watch the gallery. But Clara, please be cautious. I will. After hanging up, I wandered into a nearby art supply store. Just being there, surrounded by charcoal pencils and textured paper, bright pigments and soft brushes, brought a wash of forgotten warmth to my chest. This was who I used to be, an art history student with ink-stained fingers and dreams of curation, restoration, and creation. A young woman who hadn't yet shrunk herself to fit into someone else's mold. Back at Rachel's apartment, I spent the afternoon making final edits to my portfolio. She worked quietly beside me, tapping on her laptop, occasionally glancing over with soft encouragement. "I forgot how talented you are," she said, admiring a sketch I had just finished. I smiled. Derek never really appreciated this part of me. "No," she agreed. "He preferred talents that made him look better." I nodded. His loss. Rachel squeezed my shoulder. "Tomorrow, you show them what you're capable of." That night, as I curled into the blankets, my new phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. "Camera footage confirms. Dee visited gallery today. Spoke with director for 30 minutes. Exercise caution. R. Doyle." So he'd tried to sabotage it. Of course he had. Still, I clutched my portfolio to my chest and fell asleep with a single promise echoing in my mind. I would not let him win.
Langston Art House was housed in a beautifully restored Victorian brownstone, its bay windows glowing with soft winter light and showcasing angular metal sculptures that shimmered under the sun. I arrived 30 minutes early, dressed in a charcoal pantsuit Rachel insisted made me look like someone not to be underestimated. My portfolio case felt heavier than usual, not just with artwork, but with all the weight of everything this moment represented. Jen, one of Samantha's associates, accompanied me under the guise of a friend dropping me off. She kept her distance, but gave me a quick nod as I reached the steps. "We're watching all exits," she said softly. "If anything feels wrong, just walk out. No job is worth your safety." I nodded, but I knew in my bones, this wasn't just a job. This was the start of something that Derek had tried so hard to bury. My identity, my passion, my freedom. And I was about to reclaim it. The gallery was still and hushed in the early morning light. A young receptionist, barely out of college, greeted me with a warm smile and gestured toward a cozy sitting area. Beyond a pair of frosted glass doors, I caught a glimpse of Isabel Fay, the gallery director, a woman whose name carried weight across the New England art scene. Her signature silver bob shimmered under the ceiling's soft track lighting as she spoke animatedly into her phone, her posture crisp and commanding. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. My interview time came and went. Something felt off. Finally, the office door clicked open. Isabel emerged, her face composed, unreadable. "Miss Callahan," she said, offering a handshake. "Thank you for waiting. Please, come in." Her office was minimalist yet striking, anchored by a massive abstract painting that likely cost more than my first car. I sat across from her, carefully placing my portfolio between us, keeping my posture calm, my breath steady. "Before we begin," Isabel said, folding her hands, "I should tell you, I received a rather unusual call yesterday from your husband." My stomach flipped, but I kept my expression still. "What did he say?" She tilted her head. "He expressed concerns about your mental well-being, claimed you were undergoing a difficult divorce and might not be in the right place professionally. He also insisted that several works in your portfolio weren't your own, that they were his, submitted without permission." The audacity of it hit me like a slap. Derek couldn't even sketch a stick figure. "That's categorically false," I replied, my voice even but firm. "Every piece in that portfolio is mine, and while I am going through a divorce, I am entirely capable of doing this work." Isabel watched me, then gave a slow nod. "I suspected as much. Your husband was unusually persistent, for someone allegedly concerned about a spouse's mental state." She opened the portfolio and began flipping through the sketches and restoration samples I had labored over. Her brow furrowed in concentration. "These are strong. Your attention to detail is excellent. Color theory is precise. You've clearly studied both technique and form." We spent the next 20 minutes talking.
about my background, my studies, my years away from the field, and the vision I had for art conservation and curatorial work. With each passing minute, I could feel her skepticism giving way to interest, then curiosity, then respect. "I have one last question," she said at last. "Why now? After 15 years away, why return to this world?" I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. Because I finally remembered who I was before I became someone's wife, and because art has always been the most honest conversation I've ever had with myself. A smile flickered at the corners of her lips. "Well said." She closed the portfolio and stood. "The position is part-time to start, with the potential for full-time after 6 months. Can you begin Monday?" The relief hit so hard, I almost laughed.
"Yes," I said. "Absolutely." "Good. Monday, 9 a.m. She extended her hand again. "Welcome to Langston Art House, Clara." Outside, the winter sunlight gleamed brighter than it had in weeks. Across the street, Jen stood under a tree, raising her brows in question. "I got it," I called out, unable to contain my smile. "Congratulations," she said. "Marie's trying to reach you, said it's urgent. Let's get you home." Back at Rachel's apartment, Marie was waiting, documents spread across the coffee table. "Judge Myers approved our petition," she announced without preamble. "Derek is now legally required to cover the mortgage and utilities, plus $5,000 a month in emergency support until the divorce is finalized." I blinked. "That's more than I expected." "There's more," Marie continued. "The judge also ordered full financial disclosure from every institution tied to Derek's accounts, including those offshore. His lawyer called this morning asking for a private settlement conference." "What does that mean?" "It means," Marie said, smiling tightly, "they want to talk terms. Derek doesn't want this going to trial. Too much risk to his image, his career, his story." I dropped onto the couch, absorbing the shift in power. "So, what happens now?" "Now," Marie said, "we dictate the terms. You'll get your fair share of the house, the retirement accounts, and a non-disparagement clause to protect your name and future." My phone chimed. A text from Tessa. "Dee knows about support ruling. He's drinking. Be careful." I showed it to Marie. Her face darkened. "You're staying here tonight, and you don't go anywhere alone." That evening, Rachel insisted we celebrate. We were halfway through a bottle of Cabernet when my phone rang again. "Derek." I hesitated, then picked up. "You think you've won," he slurred. 15 years, he pressed on, ignoring me. "I gave you everything. I made you." "No," I said softly. "You didn't make me. If anything, you chipped away at me, piece by piece. But that's over now." Silence. Then he said, almost dazed, "The gallery called, told me they hired you. How did you do that? How did you make her ignore me?" I smiled, not unkindly. "Because I was ready," I said, "for a new beginning without you." I hung up before he could respond and turned to Rachel, who was watching me with wide, proud eyes. "You know what?" I said, raising my glass. "I think I'm going to be okay." Outside the window, snow had begun to fall, dusting the rooftops of Beacon Hill in soft white. December in Boston, a time of endings and beautiful, terrifying, thrilling beginnings. For the first time in months, I was looking forward to both. This story is a powerful reminder that silence is not strength when it's used to endure injustice. Clara Benson's journey shows us that even after years of being underestimated, manipulated, and gaslit, it's never too late to reclaim your voice and your life. What began as a betrayal turned into a masterclass in resilience, courage, and the quiet power of preparation. Clara didn't just survive, she strategized, she fought back, and ultimately, she won, not just legal ground, but her sense of self. If you've ever felt trapped in someone else's version of your life, let Clara's story be your wake-up call. You are more capable, more powerful, and more prepared than you think. If this story moved you, please like this video, subscribe to my channel for more real, raw stories of strength and survival, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And before you go, drop a comment and let me know which region or country you're watching from.
I'd love to see how far Clara's message of strength and freedom can reach.